Good evening, and thank you and welcome. Thank you for being here. Welcome. I wanted to welcome you all to the Indiana Landmark Center. Always a pleasure to be able to introduce any type of event in this particular space. I'm Brad Ward. I'm president and CEO here at Indiana Landmarks. I did not have any written remarks because I didn't know I was going to speak until a few minutes ago. And so my wife made the suggestion, why don't you go talk to your board member, Charlie Richardson? He always has something clever to say. And if any of you know Charlie Richardson, the only caveat was for me to be able to use this line was to just deliver it with zero charm, because he's the charmer in this group. So I wanted to, Charlie has said this now. I've heard him say this a time or two, and I really do appreciate it and believe it. He said these days we're meandering somewhere in between hope and despair on a pretty significant level in all forums and all formats. And when you think about that tonight, despite what we may think of the topic, this is something of hope. This is something of optimism, something that we didn't almost have. We didn't almost realize the connection, the link to our past. And when we really take that into perspective, that gives us a lot of hope to be able to bring forth these stories. So I want to just simply acknowledge that every once in a while, when you think about being able to host events at the Indiana Landmark Center, it dawns on me that people don't realize just how fortunate we are, not just to have this great space or the 3,000 other spaces that Indiana Landmarks touches, or even to be part of tonight's project. But the fact is this is the largest statewide entity in the country. And that is quite an achievement and quite an honor. But I think the real pride tonight goes to connecting to this endeavor and all the impressive work that went into that. So without further ado, I want to introduce our Executive Vice President, Suzanne Stannis, who will be Executive Vice President for 3 more days when she will be retiring after 41 years with Indiana Landmarks.
Thanks, everybody. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. I just wanted to tell you, in addition to this great event that we have tonight, we have a lot of exciting programs and tours coming up. So I invite you all to check out our website at indianalandmarks.org to see what else you might want to take in this summer, as well as find out information about how to become members and support our efforts to save meaningful places. Well, we can tell by this turnout that this is a popular topic, and one that holds not only a lot of fascination, but significant meaning. And as you'll see in the documentary trailer, some really powerful memories. We're really grateful to the city for their careful work and documentation that tells so many of these very important stories. And I, for one, am very excited about the full documentary coming out and watching more of these stories unfold. For those of us joining on Zoom, please use the Q&A function if you have questions, and we'll get to them as we are able. We don't expect any technical difficulties, but every once in a while we have a glitch when we show videos on Zoom. So as you're on Zoom, if there are any technical difficulties, don't worry. We'll send you a link to the video that you could watch later. With that, I'd like to introduce Natalie Van Dongen, who is the Director of Community Engagement with the City of Indianapolis.
Good evening. I want to start by just congratulating Suzanne on her retirement. Congratulations. My name is Natalie Van Dongen, and I am the Director of Community Outreach for the City of Indianapolis. This evening, we are gathered to share a glimpse into a story that has existed beneath our city's surface for generations. A story that, over the past few years, has taken on new clarity, new responsibility, and new meaning for our city. As many of you know, the White River Innovation District project has become far more than an infrastructure effort. What began as work to reconnect our communities through construction of a new bridge and expansion of the Indianapolis Cultural Trail has led to a much deeper conversation, a conversation shaped by the earliest years of Indianapolis. Because this site once lay the city's first public cemeteries, and the resting place of thousands of early residents buried from the 1820s through the late 19th century. For more than a century, industrial use and environmental changes had obscured this history. But thanks to the collaboration of the Community Advisory Group, a team of archaeologists, historians, genealogists, engineers, and community partners, and the families who have come forward to share their stories, that history is being brought back into the light with care, respect, and research at the forefront. Since 2024, a team of nearly 100 archaeologists have worked by hand to investigate this site, ultimately identifying more than 1,700 grave shafts. Human remains are now undergoing detailed analysis at the IU Indianapolis Osteology Lab, and site artifacts are being held and researched by the City of Indianapolis archives, helping to restore identities, stories, and dignity to individuals whose lives contributed to the Indianapolis we know today. Every step of this process, from excavation to research to eventual reinterment, has been guided by a commitment to transparency, community involvement, and honoring those who came before us. The documentary you are about to get a glimpse of captures this journey. The science, the history, the emotion, and the deep sense of responsibility that has shaped this work. It tells the story not just of a construction project, but of a community recognizing its past and choosing to engage with it honestly and respectfully. After the trailer, we'll move into a panel discussion with the people directly involved in this effort, the researchers, the community leaders, and the voices who are helping guide these next steps. Thank you again for joining us and for helping ensure that this history is not forgotten. And now, the trailer.
How we treat the dead says a lot about us as a people. When we put railroad tracks on top of these graves, when we put buildings on them, it minimizes, I think, our humanity. Doing what is right is often difficult.
The very first burial that we excavated fully and entirely at Henry Street was an infant. That's a child that for 200 years has been paved over numerous times. That baby was so tiny, one scoop of a backhoe, you'd never know.
Yeah.
You would never know.
We had said previously, based off of the limited information that we had, that we were at 650. We are beyond the 650. That was based off of when people were asking how many. We didn't know. Now we know how many are in this stretch of right away. We still don't know how many more we're going to find. 1/5 of the ring there, the white kind of sticking out back there.
Yeah, first time seeing this, and to know how many grave shafts they already found when there were supposed to be few. In this small section, no telling what's on the other side.
Brett does that stripping there.
There's metal brackets just...
Yeah,
someplace, hopefully, that won't be disturbed.
The construction, but it's page 144.
I found this letter to Mayor Hudnut from this woman who saw a program on the news about a grave being found while they're doing excavations out at the Diamond Chain site. Let's see here. And we were sad. I was only 9 years old then, but I remember that we went to find grandfather's grave, and there were none there. She wondered if the stones would ever be put back. Her handwritten letter is saying she and her grandmother and mother went down to see her grandfather's grave, and that all the stones were missing, and that they were thrown down at the riverbank to prevent erosion. Now, not only are the headstones gone, but the TV shows pieces of bones that have been dug up from the graves there, and I just wonder if part of those are from my great-grandfather's grave. Will other cemeteries be torn up to make areas for other business buildings? And it was interesting to see Mayor Hudnut had responded to her and assured her that things like that didn't happen anymore, that we were much more respectful. But it still kind of gave the insinuation like that it actually happened. And I thought, I'd never heard anything about this. And I had some familiarity with the idea of Greenlawn, but you really couldn't find really much more about it.
I first learned about Greenlawn Cemetery from my mother when I was a young child. One of the things she told me, and how I'd learned that she knew about it, was that they had unearthed people over there where Diamond Chain used to be. And it was somewhat of a common occurrence. The way she knew about it was that she was a student nurse at what was then Marion County General Hospital. Today it's known as Eskenazi Hospital. Well, when she was a student nurse there, they had unearthed remains and brought them to the hospital. And I could not get my head wrapped around there people underneath this building or on this property. And she said it was a cemetery, and it was called Greenlawn Cemetery.
And when I was in high school, there would be a couple of newspaper articles about bones floating down White River. And then I had an uncle that worked at Diamond Chain. Those workers, they'd find a hand or they'd find an arm bone, something like that. And so, yes, he had mentioned that about working there, and they were to keep hush-hush on it.
More coverage of the financial crisis tonight. The big three U.S. automakers are handing over their plans for the future to Congress.
For at least the next 2 to 3 months, General Motors will look a lot more like government motors. And that has consumers asking a lot of questions now that the company will be under bankruptcy protection.
Thinking back to the financial crises, the auto bailouts at the federal level impacted cities across the entire country. Here in Indianapolis, we had a GM stamping plant that had employed generations of Hoosiers. And that's important as we tell this story because the Henry Street Bridge and the development is a result of that GM bankruptcy in some ways, because that bankruptcy led to the eventual sale of that GM property, which is what we're trying to connect to downtown through this pedestrian bridge.
The common ground that most people have is that they want to see something positive happen on the former GM stamping plant site.
There's just so much potential there. It's just a new part of the city.
Bringing that stuff across the freeway, across the river, a real game changer for that community in that part of Indianapolis.
Yep.
All the historians, we knew that the cemetery was under the Diamond Chain building and that entire complex. So I immediately put together a packet and sent it to the city of Indianapolis. I had meetings with individuals to let them know, hey, you bought this land, there are dead people there. You will find human remains. I don't care what this article says and this article says. We have evidence and evidence of human remains being found up into the 2000s. So I think at the beginning, the city, they were listening to us, but thought we were kind of crazy, that all this evidence that said everything had been moved. So they're like, yeah.
In May of 23, we had a meeting with the public and the neighborhood to explain what the Henry Street Bridge was, why we were building it, what it was going to look like. When I got on stage and we were talking about how beautiful this bridge is going to be, the Henry Street Bridge is being built for infrastructure reasons. But the people in the audience didn't seem all that happy about it.
It didn't feel like the historians and the archivists were being heard.
They were questioning, well, what are you going to do with the people that are buried there? And I could hear people saying, well, they don't want to talk about the real issues. And when I'm listening to them, I say to myself, who's they? I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm they. I'm the deputy mayor of neighborhood engagement. So that's when I went up and took the mic and got on stage and said, there are people here with issues. Let's hear what they are.
After the meeting, Deputy Mayor Thomas came up to me and said, we need to talk. And I thought, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble with the city. But what I loved about her, she says, tell me what I need to know.
Initially, my thought was, well, most of the people have been relocated. So this really shouldn't be that big of a concern. But I think then starting to hear the research that was presented, you're like, okay, but what if it is?
Well, the Indianapolis Department of Public Works says it found graves at the Henry Street Bridge site last month.
Historic preservationists now say hundreds, possibly thousands of graves are likely still on the 25 acres of land.
I had spent months having really intense conversations, and I kept saying, we have to do the excavation up front. I need to go to sleep knowing that we didn't leave anyone behind when we built this road. We need to be able to go to sleep knowing we did our best. Do the excavation up front.
And I think there's the great leadership of Brandon, Deputy Mayor Thomas, kind of really helping to chart that path to where we went from having that confrontation with some of the community members to where we're having these conversations and sorting things out together.
Myself and others that were working on the project took that information to the mayor's office and said, we feel like we have a choice to make here. This is a big fork in the road. And this was approximately November, December of 2023. At that time, the mayor's office said, we agree with you because our analysis was this is a pretty easy decision. We need to do the right thing from an archaeological perspective. We can't ignore this. We can't turn our back on this.
Finding and working with Stantec, an archaeology team that has a lot of work, has a lot of technology, and understood our needs on this project.
A bigger challenge is we know what we know, but every cemetery, every project has nuances that you have to adapt to and apply the knowledge that you've gained over the years and figure out how to make it happen.
It actually tells a very interesting story because this came from an adult-sized casket, which usually has 6 handles, but this one only had 4 handles, and each one is actually different. Maybe it's somebody who couldn't afford a matching set of handles, so the family was just kind of, buying what was available to sort of get a burial container for their loved one. When we add to that story,
there's not an exact name for the discipline I'm in. I like to call myself an historical archaeologist who focuses on 19th and 20th century mortuary culture, which is basically I look at the things that are buried with individual.
So there's a lot of things going on with this individual that tell a very particular story that we're hoping as we do continued research that we might be able to come up with an identification.
We can learn about the life experience from our bones and teeth. About every week, we transfer individuals from the on-site lab run by Dr. Brooke Drew to my lab in the basement of the Education and Social Work building here at IU Indianapolis. So through this transfer and chain of custody forms, we ensure that every individual finds a place in my lab. And from there, we process, inventory, and analyze each individual.
These little multicolored squares are the burials that we're actively working on. My position on the project is the Director of Digital Data Capture. That's everything from working with reality capture and creating 3D models of the archaeological project, but also working with the databases and all the information that comes from our digital forms.
It takes the contributions from the geospatial team with Alex and the biological profiles that are generated from Jeremy and his lab, and then the material culture, which Brooke leads that analysis, and combining all that with the field observations that we had to fully tell the story.
I think telling those stories in a lot of ways humanizes the past in a way that a lot of people don't necessarily think about sometimes. Something has happened to our collective empathy, I think. And I'm hoping through projects like this where we can tell people's stories and make them very personal, that maybe it can sort of revive some of that. Maybe if we can find empathy for the past, then maybe we can start finding empathy now. And that's actually one of the reasons why I love anthropology, is you can think about the past or different peoples and sort of use that as a mirror to sort of view yourself and your own culture and society and find common ground.
Every little tiny bit that comes out of the ground is part of this process of undoing the final acts of an individual's life. We are pushing back on the forgotten story. It was early Indianapolis. It's established as the city. It is the city. Like we said, the people who built the city are buried there. Their names we may not have, but what they built is still there, and that's important.
I had this idea to create like a summer camp focused on the excavation.
At least once every week, we spend time in the anthropology lab with Dr. Wilson, actually helping to clean and articulate the burials.
Not only is it learning more about anatomy, but also trying to build the story about the individuals we're studying.
So we got a skeleton of a young Black teenage girl, so that really resonated with me. We got to clean off her bones and like take a deep look at her body, and I was the one that got to like clean her skull, which was really well preserved. And I felt like a sort of connection there with her. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, it was really special to me.
And this bridge, this Henry Street Bridge, is literally a bridge, yes, to transport people, but it's also a bridge from the past to the future. And that is what is so special about this project, because it is Indianapolis's future, but you can't move forward without knowing your past. And that's where these two marry. And the end result is exactly that, that we're able to celebrate and come together as a community and be proud of who came before us and to continue to tell the stories and continue to move forward and make Indianapolis even better.
Testing, testing. Good, awesome. Well, how about that, huh? I feel very fortunate to be sitting here with three of the folks that have contributed to what you all just saw and the work that is continuing to happen both at the site and behind the scenes, because this is a story that is not over. It's far from it. So we're excited to continue working with all of you to see what the next chapter brings. With us up here, we have Ryan Peterson, archaeologist and lead principal investigator from Stantec. We have Jerald Harkness, president and CEO of Studio Auteur and our filmmaker. And we have Leon Bates, historian and a member of our community advisory group. So first and foremost, I want to hand it over to you all. I'm hoping that you can introduce yourself in your own words, describe your role with this project and what drew you into this project or into even the story that we're talking about today.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. It's kind of overwhelming to see so many people that are interested in what we're doing. So it means a lot. Like Natalie said, I'm Ryan Peterson. I'm a co-principal investigator and project manager. I want to recognize too my additional co-PIs, Dr. Brooke Drew here in the front row, and I didn't see if Dr. Wilson was here too. And I'm going to go ahead and take liberties and thank the whole team. I see so many people that were out excavating with us that are working in the lab, and I'm up here as a representative, but it couldn't be done without everybody that was involved. We came into the project about 2 years ago now, and it kind of was already underway when we got involved with it. I'd been involved with doing multiple cemetery investigations over the last 15, 20 years. We did a large cemetery out at the airport that included over 500 individuals, at which point I was convinced that that would be the largest project I ever worked on. I was wrong. And then, you know, it grew into this. The CAG had already existed, the Community Advisory Group. The folks from the city were all on board. It really made it easy to come in at the time that I did in order to make it successful.
I've got one. Yep. Good evening, everyone. I am tripping. I mean, for a 15-minute trailer, we got this type of crowd. This is very, very moving. As Natalie said, my name is Jerald Harkness. I'm the producer and director of the project. The way I got involved was that my good friend Judy Thomas, who was deputy mayor at the time, called me up and said, hey, you need to do a documentary about this Greenlawn project. And I was like, yeah, okay, because Judy has a way of talking to you and she expects me to know exactly what she was talking about. And I had no clue. So I kind of had to fake it till I made it. But yeah, it's just a unique situation for a production company to partner up with city government. And I think we were all just trying to, you know, just figure out how do we do this? How do we go about this? So we got it going, and I knew it was an amazing story the more we dived into it. But I gotta say, it's really the great people like Ryan and Leon and all the people of CAG that have made this a very, very special experience. So as you said, Natalie, we've only got the 15-minute trailer. Right now we're editing the documentary and we're at 2.5 hours and we still have tons to film. So I'm gonna have to really cut this down, but it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm from Indianapolis. So to tell this story about Indianapolis is a real honor.
Okay, I'm Leon Bates. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Louisville in the Department of Pan-African Studies. And I got into this because of Eunice Trotter. I was at home working at my desk and Eunice called up and asked, hey, what do you know about Greenlawn Cemetery? And I started telling her and she cut me off and she said, will you go with me next week to a meeting with the city? That was more than 3 years ago now. So that's how I got involved with it. And then later when Judith Thomas created the CAG, she said, will you be on this committee with us? That's what got me where we are today.
Awesome. Well, thank you for those introductions. The first thing I wanted to ask is, you know, this is a fairly heavy topic, and to many it's viewed as a dark chapter in our city's history. So how, in each of your professional capacities, do you navigate the emotional and ethical dimensions of working on this site?
There's a lot to unpack there.
Glad you're going first.
You know, it's something that we do as professionals and we do it every day. And, you know, you have to kind of put some distance in between what you're doing and what the reality is that you're working on. That doesn't mean it doesn't affect all of us and it at different levels, more profoundly at one time than another. And part of it is having such a great team of people that you're working with all the time to kind of work through that. You know, I'm a father, and when I was younger and excavating children's graves, you're like, that child's the same age as mine. And, you know, I feel a responsibility to these people were all cared for. They had formal burials. They have things that they loved buried with them. And you have to have the respect that they were given and try to do the best you can to maintain that and give them a resting place that's appropriate.
Yeah, to kind of echo what Ryan was saying, you know, me and the production crew, we didn't live with it every day like Ryan and his team, but it's a very sobering, visceral feeling. The first time I went to the excavation site, I was with Ryan, And he said, hey, you're about to see some disturbing things, and can you handle it? And me trying to be all macho, like, yeah, man, I got it. But then I saw a full skeleton at the excavation site, and boy, it was very, very sobering. And you just, you realize how sacred these lives are and that they've been forgotten for so many years. So the production team, we took this very, very seriously. It is a very heavy topic, but with the gentleman who spoke at the beginning, I agree with him that this is ultimately a story of hope. These are a lot of people up here who are doing really good things. It's a difficult past to explore, but I really commend everybody involved for trying to do the right thing now. And it's a delicate balance, but we really try to show the optimistic side as much as the tougher side.
Yeah, and if I could follow up on that just really quickly, I think that you struck that tone very well in the trailer. Can you talk a little bit about how you came to that edit and how you were able to strike that tone?
That's a tough question. Well, our job is to try to make that look easy and like, oh, but it was a very difficult, challenging edit, and I won't go into details. But like even the open, I think we had 8 different versions of the open, Natalie. It was just trying to find our footing, trying to find the right tone, the right pace. It was very, very difficult. Fortunately, we had amazing content. Like everyone, they all said, "Oh, I don't want to do the interview," or "I dread it," but everyone was fantastic and really just shared some amazing insights. So the problem was actually almost too much good content, to be honest with you. So they made my job kind of harder and easier at the same time. But there's a lot more you guys haven't seen yet. I'll tell you that much.
And then Leon, if you could just kind of talk through the emotional and ethical element to this work and how you approached it as a member of the community advisory group.
Well, emotionally, it didn't really bother me. My wife says I compartmentalize everything. But with that said, ethically, I approached it from the very beginning that it was a moral problem we were dealing with, that you can't just go in and just start ripping and tearing without understanding what is below the surface. And at first, people, said we were being hyperbolic or that we didn't know what we were talking about. And we had to keep pushing back, and we had to keep bringing the receipts, as the kids say. And we brought lots of receipts. And eventually it came to pass that what we were saying was not hyperbole, but it was actually fact. And a lot of people were shocked to find out that, as I think as Eunice said in the video, they built a railroad track right over top of the cemetery. It's kind of hard to get your head wrapped around things like that. There were several buildings, the railroad tracks, a paved parking lot. All this was built on top of that.
A baseball stadium?
A baseball stadium, yeah. So for me, it was it was a moral problem that had to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. So along those same lines, and if we can start with you, Leon, what challenges have you faced working through this project along the way?
The problem that most researchers run into is either access to records or the records don't exist. And what I'm getting at is part of the problem with Greenlawn, a lot of those records no longer exist. They were lost, damaged, you name it. Some were burned in a fire. So that's one set of problems. The next set of problems becomes who has what existing records that are left. And they're not in one particular archive, they're scattered out. And with the missing records, we're now going to different churches around town, especially the oldest churches, and asking to see their records and what they may have. And surprisingly, some of these churches, I'd probably say all of them, have things they don't realize, these little nuggets, we might call it, that mean a great deal to researchers. But to them, it's just another entry on the page.
Wow. Are there any kind of examples that come to mind of breakthroughs in research that you've had?
Jordan, don't kill me.
I'm going off script a little bit, so I
Yeah,
apologize.
that's okay.
I take full responsibility, Jordan.
I have an answer, but let me preface it first, is that we do not have names to go with the remains that we have unearthed. That's two separate concepts right now, and it may always be that way. With that said, there was a set of remains that was discovered, and the person is estimated to be possibly 104, 105 years old, which in the 19th century, that's really very old. And I was going through one of the existing records and came across a name of someone who fit this description. So we can't connect those two. But I decided to look this person's name up, and lo and behold, this woman has a slave narrative connected to her name, which, there's only like 4,000 known slave narratives in the United States, most of them written during the WPA period in the 1920s and 30s. But this woman's narrative was written in 1858. So this is even before slavery ends. She is freed at 82, 83 years old after her son pays $400 for her freedom. And then she is delivered to New York City like freight on a UPS or a FedEx truck. The wagon pulls up, driver gets off, goes in and presents a bill to the store clerk. The clerk reads it, goes to the proprietor reads it, and agrees to pay this driver. He pays the driver the freight bill. He goes out and gets this woman off the wagon and brings her back in and has her sit down. This is how she got her freedom. That story really got to me. Now, somewhere in that 25 acres of Greenlawn Cemetery, this woman is resting today. We don't know where, but we know she's over there. And to find this narrative and to see that it's connected to Indianapolis, I'm without words.
Yeah, that's incredibly powerful. Jerald, what would you say was your biggest kind of challenge working through this story?
Biggest challenge, we have a lot of them, but I think anytime you're doing independent filmmaking, what is the saying? You're flying the plane and building it at the same time. A lot of my previous work, it's a finite story, meaning that I know the beginning, I know the middle, and I know the end. With this, I'm just trying to keep up with these guys as best that I can. So it's trying to figure out storylines and through lines and what might be an important storyline today might not be as important 3 months from now in the edit. But these are really good challenges to have. I mean, it's a very rich, very nuanced story. Leon's account just right there, I mean, that's got to make it in the documentary. And so it's a good challenge. It's something that we really welcome. And trust me, I've worked on projects where you're like, how am I going to fit the hour? Because the subject or the content isn't that strong. With this, it's the opposite. There's just so much strong content. I guess the challenge is just making it cohesive and flow and hopefully engage the audience.
I'll take a different angle on the challenges. I'll talk a little bit more about the logistical challenges. We started in October and ended in October a year later, and we worked in every season that Indiana can offer, sub-zero to over 100, and had to find logistical ways to make that happen and keep everybody relatively safe. And I won't go as far as say comfortable, because I'm sure that was not the case most of the time. But the team did it. It's slow moving. It's hard when it's freezing out there. We had real challenges because of all the development that you've heard about with the rail terminal and the baseball stadium, and the fact that that wasn't a flat lot in 1820 when 1821 when the cemetery was first started. There were substantial amounts of fill, and there were times that we were 12 to 14 feet below the current ground surface, working in a 60-foot wide corridor with steel beams and wood lagging protecting us. And I'll just be honest, I've never done that before. And so there was a lot of learning on the fly. There was a lot of cooperation with the city and with the construction teams and coordination that without that smooth working relationship, this wouldn't even have been possible.
Yeah, and I want to expand on that a little bit. Obviously, this has been a years-long endeavor. And for each of you, I'm sure there have been moments that have reshaped your understanding of this project, of the site, of the history. So can you talk us through maybe one of those moments where you thought, wow, I had one expectation of what I was getting into, and that's now blown out of the water?
One. So I think, and I'll have to be very brief on this. You all can look at the management summary that has much more detail than I can go into now. There are 4 cemeteries that get called collectively Greenlawn, and there's the original or the old burying ground, which is in the southwest corner where the new bridge is at, if you're familiar with the area. And then there's the Union Cemetery, or the new burying ground, to the east of that connects to Kentucky Avenue. We knew that there would be differences, and that was recognized, and we knew we'd hit that boundary. And we anticipated that there would be some challenges in the old burying ground. I don't know that I fully recognized how profound those challenges would be with intrusive burials that came in later, stacked burials. The density is just so much greater in that section of the cemetery than it is to the east. And just to remind you, we only worked in 2 of the 4 sections that comprise the overall what's called Greenlawn Cemetery. So I think that's fair. I'll leave it there.
I think my naivete, Ryan's my first archaeologist friend, and I'm proud of that. And I just didn't, I didn't, there you go, see, I had no idea what I was getting into. I really thought, okay, it's an excavation, we'll go film a couple of things, we'll go interview people. I thought it would be pretty, again, finite. And then talking to another good friend, Jordan Ryan, where she was like, no, this is going to be a longer process. There's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of steps to it, that, we're just sort of just trying to brace ourselves. So it's a marathon, not a sprint. I went in thinking it was going to be a sprint. I'm honored that it's a marathon, and but I think just how vast and how depth this narrative is, I had no idea starting this.
I think for me, probably the recognition of the resistance that was put up when we first started challenging this. There were quite a few people in the city, and there probably still are today, who either don't want to believe what we're saying, or they have a different agenda. And that resistance was a little surprising to me, that people would be that what I want to say, it's just that recalcitrant of a new idea.
I wanted to add one additional thing. We keep on talking about the disturbances that occurred out there, but I want to make sure that we mention that even though those all occurred, there were 982 burials that we recovered that were complete and undisturbed by any of the modern construction, which is a pretty staggering number when you look and see how much has gone on out there.
Wow, well, thank you all so much. I do believe we have some time for questions from the audience. I'm looking around, and I think we have some microphone runners as well.
No, you should hold the mic. I think they're compliments, and Natalie thinks she's done.
Have any headstones been recovered during the exploration? And is there any chance that you'll go to the riverbanks someday and look for those that are allegedly used as riprap?
Yes, we recovered fragments of many stones. I won't even I think it's just shy of 300 if I'm remembering right. Some of them, now keep in mind that includes all fragments. So some had no writing on them. Some of them had inscriptions that you could read and we got information off of. There was one very substantial cross that it shows up in newspaper articles and was kind of an iconic stone that was there for a long time. The ones that can be reconstructed, we're looking into that right now. We're recording everything, and if they don't have any information, then we'll figure out a way to rejoin them with the individuals when the reburial occurs. What else did you ask? Is that it? Oh, yeah. So we inspected all the way down the bank where we're working and have recovered everything that was even down to the ordinary high water mark. There's always a possibility there's something beyond where we were able to look, but we've thoroughly investigated that area.
Got a question over here.
Hello. Special hello to Leon Bates. We've done some work together on a few boards. I wanted to know if you've begun to develop a timeline or a chronology of when the cemetery became disposable to industrial progress. And was it post-Civil War, pre-Civil War? What companies were involved? Apparently railroads. What was the impetus? I understand small rural cemeteries sometimes disappearing, but how a major cemetery in a growing city could be sacrificed to industrial growth. Leon, when did that begin to happen?
The short version is that at the same time, the rural cemetery movement started in the 1850s, in the late 1850s and into the 1860s. Crown Hill Cemetery opens up on the north side, and Crown Hill is outside the city limits, where Greenlawn is in the city limits. Now, with that said, Greenlawn is outside the downtown mile square, and that's another whole discussion. But when Greenlawn was created, and they created the old buried ground, original buried ground first in 1821, but there were people already buried there before 1821. And then the other cemeteries come later. So as they're running out of room and expanding, they begin to realize that they're landlocked by city streets and railroads and the river. They can't really expand any farther. And you have to also consider Indianapolis, unlike most other cities of its age, does not have church cemeteries in the city. When you look around Indianapolis, you know, especially the old inner city area, they're not church cemeteries. We had Greenlawn, and probably 30 years later, you get the Jewish cemetery, the Lutheran cemetery, and then eventually Crown Hill Cemetery. So once those cemeteries start being used, Greenlawn kind of falls out of favor. And then by the time you get to the 1890s, the city of Indianapolis is faced with continually going over to mow, to weed, to cut down trees, and all the kind of, the city is faced with the maintenance of it and doesn't want to do it. So once someone has an idea to actually build over it, the state of Indiana gives the city of Indianapolis that 4 acres, and the other 3 cemeteries and that one are then sold to private interests to build and develop on. There is a caveat in that Indiana law from 1923 that says if the land is used for anything other than a cemetery, this 4 acres I'm talking about, then the city of Indianapolis is responsible to move all the remains. And that's how the people were moved from the old burial ground out to Floral Park. But now, as this work has been taking place in the old burial ground, I'm starting to question how thorough that work was. I don't know, I wasn't there, but the density that Ryan and his crew found, I question how thorough those folks were.
Quick question on how is this funded? Do you rely on donations? Do you rely on the city or the state? Can I help?
Can I get your name, please? So this is uniquely funded. We will take donations, but I think we're going to be okay. The city has agreed they funded the proof of concept. We're hoping that they'll bring in additional funding so we can complete the project.
Are they funding your filming as well?
Yes. And then part of my responsibility is finding other grants and donors for completion funds. So I'm feeling cautiously optimistic. Thank you.
My friend and I, Charlie, we go over to check on the progress on the Henry Street Bridge all the time. It looks like it's pretty far along. The other day we were there and we were standing on the sidewalk of Kentucky Avenue looking dead down the path. And there's the bridge. You can see it clearly from Kentucky now. There's a right-of-way. You can envision the right-of-way. My question is that the area that you worked on? That right-of-way leading up to the bridge? What about on either side of it?
Yeah, we were constrained to the city's right of way for what was Henry Street when we started the project. It was about 60 feet in width from north to south and extended to the river. It expands a little bit when you get down to the river up to about 100 feet where the bridge attaches to the east bank of the White River.
We've got so many questions coming in on Zoom that we're not going to be able to get to all of them or the ones in the audience. But let me ask Jordan, are there places where people can pose additional questions or, on the CAG website, or if people need more information, where can they go?
Yeah, we have a project website. It's White River Innovation District Infrastructure. So that's WRID infrastructure.com. You can enter questions. You can send, if you have a lead, if you think you have an ancestor buried in the cemetery, we can connect with you and work with you that way.
And then one other question. What do you think has led to the CAG's success? How has that become kind of a model for other community organizations and groups that are concerned with issues such as this?
Don't think that it's been all sunshine and roses. There have been days when we have been a very dysfunctional family. But with that said, I think everyone has been honest about their position and what they think, how they feel. And we've had to work through that, realizing it's a difficult topic to deal with. And we've been doing, like I said, what, 3 years now? Yeah, 3 years. Wow. That it's been a lot of work. It's been a lot to think about and a lot to adjust to. And we're not done. We still have probably a couple more years of just dealing with what has been discovered now, with what the research is going to show.
First of all, let me thank you for all your great work. I'm a real old cemetery nerd, and I suspect a lot of the people in here are too. I know nothing about filmmaking. I'm a big Heartland Film Festival fan. Where do you see your film going? What do you plan to do with it when this project comes to some level of termination?
Great question. Wasn't expecting that. So I've been fortunate. I've been producing and directing documentaries for about 30 plus years. And most of my work is distributed nationally, either theatrical or streaming and cable, or what's called educational distribution. We've soft pitched this to a couple of pretty major streamers. They don't see this as true crime, so they passed for now. But our motto is we always want to find the biggest audience possible to have the biggest impact. So I'm sure that we will be premiering it here, of course, naturally. Heartland's screening one of my films this Friday, so we've got a good relationship with Heartland. I'm sure they'll be involved with the premiere, so stay tuned, though. That's a good question. Thank you.
Hello. I love this event.
This is amazing. Are we going to have another update in like 6 months, 12 months? When can we do this again? Is my question.
I will say keep a lookout on the White River Innovation District website, the WRIDinfrastructure.com. We will continue to post updates there. There will be continued avenues for that kind of public engagement. And then, of course, there is a feature-length film coming out of this. So we're very excited for the day that we will be able to premiere that, and hopefully here, because look at this audience. So yes, continue to check out the website. If you have any, as Jordan said, any leads, any questions, any research of your own you would like to submit, we are always taking that. So please check that out. And we're excited to continue to bring in the community, bring in the public, and tell people this incredible story.
Right behind you.
I have two questions. The first one is Lucas Oil Stadium is in that area, but is it not part of the, okay. And my second question is, so I have read a little bit about this, and it seems like I read somewhere that when they were moving the bodies, like to Crown Hill, if the family of the decedent had money to move the decedent, that played into whether they got moved or not. Is that correct?
That's part of the story, yes. That is correct for some of the burials. There were more systematic efforts at different periods in the old burying ground, as well as the North or Peck's burying ground too, and Greenlawn. I don't have time to get into that. You should talk to one of the historians or archivists that will fill you in on that. There's actually, I think, some information on that too on the website.
Thank you. Well, I realize that this was limited to the cities right away, this project, but there's still a considerable amount of privately owned property that on where the cemeteries were originally located. Is it possible to extrapolate your findings into what might be buried in the remainder of the cemetery? And also, do you think, this is kind of a two-parter, that this documentary might help raise awareness of, of how the bodies in the rest of the cemetery land should be treated respectfully?
Yes, for the documentary.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. You heard Jerald on the documentary part. So as I mentioned, we sampled systematically, I think it was near the mid part of each of those two cemeteries, the original burying ground and then the Union Cemetery. So yeah, I think we do have some good information that could be extrapolated for the density for those two portions of the overall cemetery. So keep in mind that 2 of the 4 cemeteries we didn't do any excavation in. So there's more information to be had for sure. And that information is, or what we found in those densities are on the WRID website right now. So they're available to everyone to take a look at. And, I definitely don't want you to pin me down to give you an estimate on how many are there today.
Okay, one more question. So we're at time.
Of the private land where the rest of the bodies may be, who's the largest landowner?
Okay, it's owned by a private developer here in Indianapolis, and they have desires to build on it. It's roughly 23 acres. What their plans are exactly, we don't know. We're not privy to that, other than what we read in the newspaper as well.
But that ownership is public information, correct?
Yes.
So wouldn't that be the question to the City of Indianapolis person? Who owns that?
For today's purposes, I do want to focus on the work that was done within the city's right of way, but I do acknowledge the question. Absolutely.
All right, we're at time. So I know there's a lot of questions. We're going to hang out If you have additional questions, please check out our website, wridinfrastructure.com. If you have particular research or reference questions, feel free to contact us at archives@indy.gov, and we're happy to help. Thank you to Indiana Landmarks for hosting us, and thank you for being here.